He put Patrick Vieira at 7, you've got him at 3. You were an Arsenal fan growing up, that would have been the time you watched him, was it?
He wasn't arrogant in any way, but he had this aura about him that if you want to mix it, I'll have a fight with you today. Yeah. Anyone.
Yeah, you could see that. I mean, it's not that. I think a few probably cowered away from Roy Keane, though.
I never respected him. That is the phrase that stopped people cold the moment Alan Shearer sat down and started naming the 10 toughest rivals of his entire career. People heard those words and assumed this was going to be a list full of grudges, old wounds, and scores that never got settled. They expected bitterness. They expected resentment. They expected a man looking back with sharp edges still showing after all these years. But the moment you hear the full story, you realize something completely unexpected. Every single man on this list earned something that goes far deeper than rivalry. They earned his most honest and genuine professional respect. And if you are already locked in, hit the hype button right now and give this video all the hype it deserves. It keeps the channel alive and it means more content exactly like this one coming your way very soon. So think about what we are actually talking about here. How do you stop the Premier League's all-time record goal scorer, Alan Shearer? 260 goals. 14 seasons at the very top of the English game. He played for Southampton, where the raw talent first announced itself to the world. Then for Blackburn Rovers, where he became the most expensive player in British football history at the time, and delivered the Premier League title to a club that had waited over 80 years for it. And then came the homecoming. Newcastle United. His club, his city, the place where he became something bigger than football, something that belongs permanently to the identity of a place and its people. He pulled on the number 9 shirt at St James's Park and never took it off until the very end. Across those 14 years, the game changed completely around him. The league he started in was built on hard men who would fly into you at full pace without hesitation or apology. Then the world arrived. Athletic defenders with pace and strength the English game had never previously seen came flooding through the doors, bringing new standards and new challenges with them. And then the game evolved one more time into something more composed, more technical, more about reading the play and positioning your body correctly than winning the physical war on instinct and desire. 3 completely different eras of defending, and Shearer scored through every single one of them, but not without a serious fight. 10 men in particular made that fight harder than any others. And tonight we are counting them down from number 10 all the way to number 1, the man Shearer has called the best he ever played against. No filler, no fluff, just the real, honest story of the battles that built the golden age of the Premier League. Number 10. Gary Pallister. There is a particular kind of brilliance in football that never quite gets the credit it deserves. The quiet kind, the efficient kind, the kind that does not announce itself with thundering tackles or dramatic last-ditch interventions. Gary Pallister was that kind of brilliant, and it is the reason that people still underrate him today. He played at the heart of Manchester United's dominant early title-winning teams, alongside Steve Bruce, and Shearer has been very direct on this point. The Bruce and Pallister combination was the best defensive partnership he faced at the very beginning of his career. What made Pallister genuinely difficult to play against was not brute force, though he was certainly physically capable. It was the quality of his thinking. Pallister read the game better than almost any other defender of his era. He read Shearer's runs before Shearer had fully committed to making them. He would identify the intention, shift his weight, and be in the right position before the movement had even started. He used his tall and rangy frame, along with his long reach, to intercept crosses that should have been perfect deliveries into dangerous areas. The ball would come in, and Pallister would be there first, cleanly, without drama, without fuss, taking it away and moving it on as though nothing difficult had happened at all. There were no wild lunges, no theatrical challenges, just precise, well-timed, infuriatingly calm defending. Shearer has praised Pallister as underrated when it came to the mental side of the position. He was the thinking man's centre-back in an era that still largely rewarded physicality and aggression over intelligence and positioning. The partnership he formed with Bruce gave Shearer enormous problems during those early Blackburn years, and Shearer measured his own progress partly by how well he could handle that combination. What made Pallister particularly awkward to prepare for was the fact that he rarely gave you anything emotional to work with. He never lost his head, never got drawn into a confrontation, never allowed the game to become personal in a way that you could exploit. You could not rattle him, and in a duel between two professionals at the highest level, the ability to stay completely calm under sustained pressure is one of the most powerful tools a defender can carry. Pallister's ability to stay composed, to never be rattled, to make the right decision under intense pressure was something Shearer noted and admired. Quiet, consistent, and thoroughly effective. That is why he starts our list at number 10. From that quiet intelligence, the list shifts to something altogether louder and more relentless. Number 9. Patrick Vieira. Patrick Vieira was not a centre-back. He played in central midfield. But if you are a striker who builds your game on dropping deep to link play, holding the ball, bringing others into the attack, and then pushing into the box to score, the first barrier you face is not the defender. It is whatever is standing in front of the defender. And for the best part of a decade in the Premier League, what was standing in front of the defence was Patrick Vieira, and there was no easy way past him. He was a giant in every sense of the word. Physically enormous, with a stride that covered huge amounts of ground almost effortlessly. He pressed when Shearer dropped deep. He tracked back when Shearer pushed forward. There was no comfortable zone. There was no moment where the pressure eased. Vieira shrank the pitch around you. He made it feel as though the space that should have existed simply did not. Shearer has described Vieira as relentless, and that single word captures everything. It was not just that Vieira was difficult to get past once, it was that he never stopped. For 90 full minutes, the covering, the pressing, the tracking, the physical engagement, all of it continued at the same intensity from the first whistle to the last. And Vieira was not just effective defensively, he was world-class in possession. He broke up the play and immediately drove forward, influencing both ends of the pitch with every involvement. Shearer respected that complete picture enormously. Vieira also represented something broader about how the Premier League was changing. The emergence of the world-class defensive midfielder, who could dominate in both halves of the game, was reshaping how strikers had to approach their work. Vieira was the standard setter for that new reality. When his name appeared in the team sheet, Shearer already knew the kind of afternoon he was heading into. From the relentless engine, the list moves to a man who wore Shearer down in a completely different way. Number 8. Martin Keown. Martin Keown was a pest. And Shearer uses that word in the most genuinely admiring way that a professional sportsman possibly can. Because being a pest at the very highest level, maintaining that approach consistently, relentlessly, across an entire 90-minute match against one of the most physical and determined strikers who ever played the game, takes a very specific and very serious kind of commitment. Shearer famously called Keown the ultimate pest defender. And when you break down what that actually means in practice, the picture becomes very clear. Keown's approach to marking Shearer was total. He was not simply close, he was attached, physically, constantly, without any pause or relief. He was in your ear at every moment. He was pulling your shirt at every set piece. He was stepping on your heels when you moved, giving you a little push when the referee's eye was elsewhere, using a constant stream of niggling contact to break your concentration and stop your rhythm from ever building. Keown played at the very edge of what was permissible. He was not interested in defending cleanly when defending effectively was available. And here is what made that particularly brutal. Keown was part of the same Arsenal unit as Tony Adams. So while Adams was running the tactical operation from a strategic level, organising the offside trap, reading Shearer's intentions from distance, Keown was right there, doing the close-range physical work. It was an attack on two completely different levels simultaneously, one defender engaging the brain, the other engaging the body. Together, they created something almost impossible to deal with. Despite all of that, Shearer has spoken about the professional respect that existed between the two of them. Keown viewed Shearer as a genuine equal, someone who gave just as good as he got and never sought sympathy. And Shearer acknowledged that Keown's particular brand of determination was a crucial ingredient in one of the most formidable defensive systems the Premier League has ever seen. That mutual recognition is what separates real rivalry from mere hostility. From the pest to the defender who never even needed to get physical to beat you. Number 7. Rio Ferdinand. Every defender before this point on the list has involved some form of direct physical contest, tactical battle, or psychological pressure. Rio Ferdinand offered something entirely different and in many ways more deeply frustrating. He offered humiliation, but not the kind that leaves a mark on your body, the kind that leaves you standing in space, wondering how the ball got taken off you without you feeling it happen. Shearer has called Ferdinand a different kind of tough, and that phrase contains a great deal of quiet truth. What Ferdinand brought to defending was a level of composure and positional reading that made the physical battle Shearer wanted to have simply vanish before it started. He moved to the right position so early and so accurately that Shearer would look up to receive a delivery and find Ferdinand already standing precisely where the ball needed to go. He would take it, turn, and move it on without breaking stride. No fuss, no effort visible. No sign whatsoever that he had just denied one of the most dangerous strikers in the world a clear chance. Shearer has described watching Ferdinand do this and seeing a man who had not even broken a sweat. And for a player whose entire identity was built on physical dominance, on asserting himself and winning battles, facing someone who removed all of those battles from the equation was a deeply unsettling experience. There was nothing to intimidate, nothing to push against. Ferdinand was not impressed, not afraid, not rattled. He had already worked out exactly what was going to happen and had already placed himself to make sure it would not. Shearer's genuine respect for Ferdinand reflects how much the game had evolved by the time Rio reached his peak. The composed, ball-playing centre-back who beats you with his mind was the future arriving in real time. Ferdinand was ahead of every other defender in showing what that looked like. From effortless composure to a defender who came at you with everything at once. Number 6. Sol Campbell. Sol Campbell, the mountain. That is the word Shearer used. And it is the right one. Whether he was at Tottenham in the earlier part of his career, or later at Arsenal as a fundamental part of the legendary Invincibles side, Campbell was a physical force unlike almost anything else a striker would encounter across an entire career. His combination of raw, natural power and extraordinary recovery speed was almost unfair in its completeness. You could not muscle him out of the way, because he was bigger and stronger than almost everyone, and you could not create space by using your movement and then act on it, because even if you found half a yard, Campbell's recovery pace meant that window closed before you could use it. It was a trap with no exit. Shearer has talked about the battle for the first header as often being the decisive moment in a match, the moment that sets the tone and tips the balance. Campbell was one of the very few men who could compete with Shearer equally in those aerial contests. Real power, real physicality, real refusal to give ground. Never a second of peace. Always right there, always in the contest, always making the full force of his presence felt in every single exchange. Now, here is the genuinely fascinating detail that separates Campbell from the men above him on this list. Shearer has admitted he did not actually mind playing against Campbell quite as much as some others, despite him being among the most physically dominant defenders on the list. The reason for that reveals just how intelligent a footballer Shearer was beneath the physical exterior. He felt he could drag Sol to where he wanted him. Campbell's aggression and desire to dominate physically sometimes meant that a clever, experienced striker who knew exactly when and where to move could manipulate that energy, pulling him slightly out of position in ways that the more tactically rigid Adams would rarely allow. Physical marvel, world-class defender. But occasionally, just occasionally, Shearer found the angle. From the mountain, the list moves to the one opponent Shearer described with a single, loaded word. Number 5. Jaap Stam. Scary. That is Shearer's word. Not tough, not physical, not demanding. Scary. And when that word comes from Alan Shearer, a man who was himself known for sneaky elbows and an absolutely uncompromising approach to the physical side of the game, it carries significant weight. Jaap Stam arrived at Manchester United as part of their historic treble-winning side and immediately introduced something the Premier League had not quite encountered at this level before. He was enormous. He was fast in a way that made no physical sense given that size. He had an aerial presence that could match the best strikers in the world, and he had what Shearer calls the look. A fixed, cold, utterly committed expression on his face that communicated a very simple message before a single ball was kicked. He was willing to go through you to get to the ball, not around you, not beside you, through you. That psychological message, delivered without a word before the game had even started, was worth something all by itself. It got into your preparation, it got into your thinking before kickoff. Shearer has said that Stam was one of the very few men who could consistently outmuscle him in aerial duels, and the physical cost of those duels was real and lasting. Playing against Stam meant accepting that you would be bruised for a week after the final whistle. Not sore in the normal way that every hard game leaves you, genuinely bruised, marked, carrying the evidence of the contest on your body for days. There is something uniquely draining about an opponent who makes every single aerial challenge feel like a full collision. No softening, no easing off late in the game. Stam came for every single ball with the same fierce, total commitment in the 89th minute as he had in the first. That consistency of intensity, that refusal to let the energy drop even when tired legs might justify it, was one of the qualities that put him on an entirely different level from most defenders. Stam refused to be intimidated by anyone on any pitch. He met Shearer's physical commitment and matched it completely. Over 90 minutes, facing Stam was not a football match in the traditional sense. It was an endurance test, a contest to see who could take more punishment and keep going. Shearer has admitted he met his match physically in very few men across his career. Stam was firmly in that small group, from the scariest to the man who was perhaps the most complete physical obstacle. Number 4. Marcel Desailly. Marcel Desailly arrived in English football as one of the most decorated defenders on the planet. A World Cup winner with France, a Champions League winner with AC Milan, he was known across the world as The Rock. And when Shearer first went up against him at Chelsea, he described the experience of backing into Desailly as bouncing off a solid object. Not a person who shifts when you apply force, not someone you can generate leverage against. A solid, fixed, immovable thing. The challenge Desailly presented was unique in Shearer's experience because he combined world-class physical strength with genuine elite pace. The traditional English centre-back of the early Premier League years was strong or fast, but rarely both at once to that level. Desailly was both, and that particular combination meant the standard Shearer approach of winning the physical battle to create space and then exploiting that space simply did not function. Desailly matched him for strength and beat him for speed. That left Shearer with a problem he had not faced in quite the same form before. And here is where the story of this rivalry becomes genuinely brilliant. Shearer was willing to adapt. During the 2003 to 2004 season, with Newcastle facing Chelsea, Shearer focused all of his energy into one very specific physical moment. He no longer tried to beat Desailly over a long sequence of play. He waited, shielded, worked, and then at exactly the right instant, he shrugged Desailly off just enough to create a fraction of room 30 yards from goal. And then he did what Shearer always did with even the smallest opportunity. He buried it. A 30-yard strike that won the match for Newcastle against The Rock. Shearer has said he always fancied his chances in a physical battle, even when he knew he was slower than his opponent. Against Desailly, that mentality produced one of his most satisfying goals. From the immovable Rock to the man who took the Premier League back to its foundations. Number 3. Neil Ruddock. Travel back now, all the way back to the very start of the Premier League story, before the Desaillys and the Stams arrived from the continent and changed what defending meant in English football. Before all of that, there was a specific and very particular type of hardman who defined the early years of the league. Physical, direct, completely unbothered by the technical and tactical subtleties that would later come to dominate the conversation. Focused entirely on one outcome, making sure that you, the striker, understood before anything else happened that this was going to be a long and painful afternoon. Nobody delivered that message more effectively or with less regard for the finer points of the game than Neil "Razor" Ruddock. Shearer has described Ruddock as the heaviest hitter in the league during those early years. And when Shearer says heaviest hitter, he is not speaking loosely. Ruddock flew into tackles at a pace that most defenders would not have considered anywhere near sensible. There was no pulling back, no hesitation, no calculation about risk or reward. just pure, total commitment to the physical confrontation at full speed. Shearer has joked, with the kind of directness that only comes from genuine respect, that Ruddock did not care about the ball. He cared about you. That was the philosophy. The ball was almost incidental. What needed to be addressed first was the striker's body and the striker's confidence. Ruddock did not carry the tactical sophistication of Adams or the composed intelligence of Ferdinand. He was not playing that game at all. He was playing a much more fundamental and visceral one. But in the early years of the Premier League, that game was remarkably effective. It required Shearer to maintain maximum alertness from the very first second of every match. One lapse in concentration, one moment of distraction, and Ruddock was there, coming at full pace with everything he had. Shearer respected the honesty of that approach. There was nothing hidden about it and nothing apologetic, just the straightforward, old-school promise of a physically demanding afternoon, delivered at 100 miles an hour. From the old-school enforcer to the rivalry that produced the most dramatic single moment on this entire list. Number 2. Roy Keane. Roy Keane was not a centre-back. But as this list has already made clear more than once, the men who shaped Shearer's most difficult afternoons were not always the ones standing directly against him at the back. Keane played in central midfield, and he was the heartbeat, the engine, the absolute core of Sir Alex Ferguson's greatest Manchester United sides. His role was to dominate the middle of the pitch, to control, to intimidate, to make life as difficult as possible for every single opponent who tried to move the ball forward. And for Shearer, who needed a constant flow of service to function at his best, Keane was the man trying to cut off that supply at its source. Their rivalry built slowly over years of intense meetings between Newcastle and Manchester United, two clubs fighting for different things, but always bringing maximum intensity to their encounters. The tension grew across seasons, match by match, challenge by challenge. And then it exploded completely in September 2001, St James's Park. Newcastle against Manchester United. It was already a classic match, heading for a final score of 4-3 in Newcastle's favour. As the game entered its final minutes and the pressure on United intensified, Shearer made a deliberate, calculated decision. He knew Keane's temperament. He had watched it up close over many years. He knew exactly which buttons existed and exactly what happened when they were pressed. During a throw-in situation, Shearer positioned himself carefully to block Keane from taking it quickly, killing a few precious seconds and disrupting United's urgency. Keane responded by throwing the ball directly at Shearer's head. Then, in a moment of absolute furious frustration, he swung a punch. It missed. The referee did not miss the swing. Red card, off the pitch. And Shearer's reaction as Keane walked away, that barely visible, small, controlled smile at the corner of his mouth, is one of those Premier League moments that belongs permanently in the game's memory. But the confrontation did not end on the pitch. Keane waited at the top of the stairs in the tunnel. Shearer has described him as having steam coming out of his ears. The hostility was real, physical, and intense. And yet Shearer has always maintained that underneath all of that, his feelings toward Keane were rooted in deep professional respect. He called him a great player and a genuine hard man who could change the outcome of a match through sheer force of will alone. Keane, decades later, has admitted that Shearer still annoys him, which tells you everything you need to know about the fire that both men carried throughout their careers. Shearer took genuine pride in being one of the very few who could rattle Keane's cage. Because that was not just personal, that was tactical. Getting Keane sent off in a tight match was a weapon, and Shearer used it perfectly. From tunnel rage and red cards to the man standing alone at the very top of this list. Number 1, Tony Adams. Here we are, the man himself. The one Alan Shearer pointed to without hesitation when asked directly who was the best defender he ever faced. Tony Adams. And if you have followed every single name on this list, from number 10 to this point, you understand exactly why Adams stands above all of them. Because every man on this countdown brought something exceptional. Pallister brought quiet, intelligent reading of the game. Vieira brought relentless, ground-eating, pitch-shrinking pressure. Keown brought maddening, close contact, boundary-pushing disruption. Ferdinand brought effortless composure and the infuriating ability to make the fight disappear. Campbell brought mountain-like power combined with the recovery pace of a sprinter. Stam brought genuine physical fear and the willingness to trade punishment for 90 minutes without flinching. Desailly brought the most complete combination of strength and speed Shearer had encountered. Ruddock brought old-school, unapologetic, full-speed commitment to the physical contest. Keane brought psychological intensity, tunnel rage, and a competitive fire that still has not gone out. But Tony Adams brought all of it together, not in equal proportions, not in the same form as any individual rival above, but combined in a way that added up to something greater than any single ingredient. He was the spine of Arsenal across two separate managerial eras, under George Graham and then under Arsene Wenger, and he led a defensive unit that operated with a precision that was almost mechanical in its consistency. The Arsenal offside trap under Adams was not simply a tactic, it was a weapon deployed with absolute accuracy. It was coordinated, timed, and applied with such relentless consistency that it could render the most dangerous striker in the country harmless. Shearer has described the mental challenge of playing against Adams as being forced to time his runs to the absolute millisecond. Not roughly right, to the millisecond. One fraction of a second too early and the linesman's flag went up. Adams possessed an almost extraordinary ability to read Shearer's intentions, to identify the exact moment Shearer was committing to a run, and step up to catch him at that precise instant. Again and again, match after match. And then, layered on top of all of that tactical mastery, Adams was physically aggressive. He used the dark arts. He hit hard. He made sure Shearer understood that playing against Arsenal meant absorbing real physical contact. And then, once the challenge was done and the ball was dead, Adams would reach down and help Shearer off the ground. Hit hard, offer a hand. That was his philosophy. That combination of fierce competitive aggression and genuine professional respect defined everything about their relationship. It also tells you something important about what made Adams so complete as a defender. He could be the enforcer and the gentleman in the same moment. He could make you feel the weight of every challenge and still extend the hand that acknowledges your quality and your worth as an opponent. That is not something you can coach. That is character. The numbers make it plain. 21 meetings, 4 wins for Shearer's teams, 6 draws, 11 losses. A points per match figure of just 0.86. That is not a difficult opponent. That is a dominant one. Adams did not just make things hard for Shearer. He was a problem Shearer could never fully crack across an entire 14-year career. And when you consider how rarely any player could genuinely claim that over Shearer's 14 seasons, the full scale of what Adams achieved in those head-to-head battles becomes even more remarkable. And yet, when Shearer talks about Adams, there is no bitterness, no resentment, only admiration. He called Adams the benchmark against which he measured his own professionalism, the standard for what a defender could be, the best he ever faced. Full stop. There it is. 10 men, 10 different ways to try and stop the unstoppable. Gary Pallister with his quiet, calm anticipation. Patrick Vieira with his relentless, pitch-shrinking engine. Martin Keown with his infuriating and magnificent close-contact pestering. Rio Ferdinand with his effortless, sweat-free composure. Sol Campbell with his mountain strength and frightening recovery. Jaap Stam with his scary, enduring physical presence. Marcel Desailly with his immovable wall of strength and world-class pace. Neil Ruddock with his old-school, unapologetic, full-speed commitment. Roy Keane with his tunnel rage intensity and psychological fire. And Tony Adams, standing above all of them, the best Alan Shearer ever faced. What every single one of these men shares is this: they made him better. Every battle, every adaptation forced upon him by a defender he could not simply overpower, every frustration that pushed him to find another way. They are the reason 260 Premier League goals means what it means. They are the proof that the record was earned in the hardest conditions, against the most formidable resistance the game could produce. It is worth noting that even outside this 10, Shearer has spoken about the hardest player he encountered in a broader sense. Duncan Ferguson. Not a defender at all, but a fellow striker. Yet Big Dunk carried an aura before the game even started. The kind of psychological presence that made entire teams nervous from the moment they saw his name on the team sheet. Other players were genuinely petrified of Ferguson. That quality of mental fortitude, that ability to affect outcomes before a ball is kicked, was something Shearer understood from the inside, because he had it himself. And it was the common thread connecting every single man on this list. They did not just play the game, they imposed. These 10 rivalries are the story of the Premier League growing up, transforming from a hard, direct, physical domestic competition into a technical, global, sophisticated spectacle. And Alan Shearer stood at the centre of it all through every chapter. The classic English number 9, evolving and adapting and scoring through each era. The steel that sharpened him stands here in 10 names. And the respect that still exists between all of these men, decades after the last whistle, is a testament to the standards they set and the golden era they built together. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss a single thing we've got coming up. Leave a comment below and tell us who you think was the toughest defender Shearer ever faced. Was it Adams at the top? Was it Stam? Is there a name we should have included? We want to hear from you. Until next time.